She called me a mistake in front of 200 people. Not in a whisper, not in anger, but smiling. "You know how daughters are." My mother laughed into the microphone at my cousin's engagement party in Dallas. "Some are blessings. Some are lessons." Everyone laughed. And then she looked straight at me. That was the night I stopped being her daughter. My name is Madison Blake. I'm 28 years old. And for most of my life, I was the family embarrassment. I didn't marry rich like my sister. I didn't become a lawyer like my brother. I didn't represent the Blake name properly. I worked 2 jobs. I rented a small apartment. I drove a used Honda with peeling paint. And according to my mother, that made me temporary. "You'll understand one day," she'd say at Thanksgiving in our big Houston house. "Status matters." What she didn't understand? Silence builds strategy. 3 years before that party, my father quietly transferred majority shares of Blake Construction into my name. Not because he favored me, because I was the only one who showed up. While my siblings networked at country clubs, I was at job sites at 6 a.m., learning concrete ratios and supply chain costs. I listened. I asked questions. I worked. Dad never praised me. But he watched, and when he got sick, it wasn't my brother at the hospital. It was me. But the family assumed everything would go to my brother anyway. "He's the legacy," my mother would say proudly. So I let them believe it. At that engagement party, when she called me a lesson, I felt something shift, not anger, clarity. Because earlier that same afternoon, my phone had buzzed with confirmation from the board. The acquisition was complete. Blake Construction was no longer under temporary management. It was under me. And I had just signed the restructuring plan. My brother's executive position? Eliminated. My sister's brand consultant contract? Terminated. My mother's monthly family advisory stipend? Revoked. All legally, all clean, all deserved. But I didn't announce it that night. Revenge doesn't interrupt the party. It waits for Monday. 2 days later, my brother stormed into what he thought was his office. Security escorted him out. He called Dad. Dad told him to call me. That was the first time he used my title. "Madison, what the hell is going on?" I remember staring at the Houston skyline from the corner office that used to belong to him. "What's going on?" I said calmly. "Is that lessons grow up?" There was silence, then shouting, then threats, then my mother calling me ungrateful. "You're destroying this family over a joke?" No. I was correcting it over years of disrespect. They thought I was emotional. They didn't realize I was audited. Every insult, every exclusion, every time I was told to sit quietly at business dinners. I built my exit while they built assumptions. But here's the part nobody talks about. Revenge isn't loud, it's lonely. The night after everything collapsed, I sat alone in that massive house. The same house where I'd been introduced as the struggling one. It felt bigger, quieter, emptier. Power is cold when you finally hold it. And that's when my father called. Not angry, not proud, just tired. "You were always stronger than them," he said. It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest thing I'd ever get. My mother hasn't spoken to me since. My sister posts vague quotes about betrayal on Instagram. My brother is exploring new opportunities. And me? I rebranded the company. Not Blake Construction, but M. Blake Holdings, because I was never the lesson. I was the contingency plan. And if there's one thing I learned growing up in that house, never mock the quiet daughter. She's the one reading the contracts. This is only the beginning. They didn't come back with apologies. They came back with lawyers. Exactly 12 days after my brother was escorted out of the building, I was served papers at 8:14 a.m. Right as I stepped out of my car. Wrongful termination. Breach of fiduciary duty. mental incompetence of my father during share transfer. That last one was my mother's idea. I know because she texted me before the filing even hit the court system. You've manipulated your sick father. This won't hold up. Manipulated? I was the one who held his hand through chemo. I was the one who read financial reports out loud when he was too tired to see. I was the one he trusted. But trust terrifies people who built their lives on entitlement. The lawsuit wasn't about money. It was about humiliation. They couldn't stand that the lesson had become the headline. And here's what they didn't know. I had prepared for this too. 3 years earlier, when Dad first mentioned transferring shares, I insisted on independent evaluations, cognitive assessments, third-party witnesses, video documentation, every signature notarized, time-stamped, archived. They thought I was naive. I was building a vault. The hearing was set for a Friday morning in Houston. My mother arrived in cream silk. My brother in a navy suit he thought screamed authority. I wore black, not for drama, for closure. When their attorney argued that Dad lacked clarity during the transfer, my legal team calmly submitted the medical cognitive report dated the same week as the signing. Perfect scores. Then came the video. My father, clear-voiced and steady, stating, "I am transferring majority ownership to Madison because she understands this business, and because she earned it." You could feel the oxygen leave the room. My brother wouldn't look at me. My mother stared like I'd committed treason. But the worst part? It wasn't the judge dismissing their motion. It was what happened outside the courthouse. Reporters were waiting. Someone leaked the story. Family feud over multi-million-dollar construction empire. My sister's husband works in PR. I'll let you connect the dots. They wanted to paint me greedy. Instead, the narrative shifted. Daughter who ran company behind the scenes wins legal battle. Suddenly, I wasn't the embarrassment. I was the strategist. And public image is currency in Houston's business circles. Investors started calling. New contracts landed on my desk. But success has a smell. And desperate people can sense it. 3 nights after the court dismissal, my father was rushed back to the hospital. Heart complications. I arrived to find my mother already there. She looked smaller. Anger ages people. "He needs peace," she said quietly. "This stress is killing him." Stress? They sued me. But I didn't argue, because for the first time she didn't sound cruel. She sounded afraid. Dad woke briefly that night. He motioned for me to lean in. "You can't save people from themselves," he whispered. "Just protect what you built." It felt like instruction, not comfort. The next morning, I made a decision that shocked everyone. I offered my brother a severance package, not because he deserved it, but because I didn't want war inside the walls of something I worked for. He refused. Pride is expensive. So I let him walk away with nothing but his last name. And that's when things got ugly. Anonymous complaints were filed with the board. Suppliers suddenly backed out of contracts. Rumors started spreading that I was unstable. Classic intimidation. Except they forgot something. I grew up unstable. I grew up being told I wasn't enough. You can't scare someone who already survived exclusion at her own dinner table. So I did what quiet daughters do best. I investigated. Every supplier withdrawal traced back to one competitor. A competitor my brother suddenly consulted for. Conflict of interest, corporate interference, and guess who still owned 51% voting power? Me. The emergency board meeting lasted 4 hours. By the end of it, I had evidence, signatures, and authorization. A cease and desist was issued, and my brother's consulting deal terminated before it fully launched. He called me that night, not yelling, not threatening, just defeated. "You're destroying everything," he said. "No," I replied. "I'm protecting it from people who thought it was theirs." Silence again. We've become a family of silences. My mother hasn't tried calling since the hospital. My sister stopped posting quotes. And Dad? He's recovering slowly, but something shifted between us. For the first time in my life, when visitors come to the house, he introduces me as, "This is Madison. She runs the company." Not my brother, not the kids, me. And you'd think that would feel like victory. But here's the truth nobody tells you about revenge. It doesn't heal the little girl who wanted applause. It just proves she was capable all along. And just when I thought the war was finally cooling, I received an email that changed everything. Subject line: regarding your mother's private accounts. And attached, financial records, hidden transfers, offshore movements, money that never appeared in company books, money that disappeared years ago, before Dad got sick, before the shares were transferred, before I was ever called a lesson. Turns out, I wasn't the only one building in silence. The email sat in my inbox for 3 hours before I opened the attachments again. Offshore accounts, wire transfers, Shell LLCs registered in Delaware and the Cayman Islands. The dates went back 7 years, long before Dad got sick, long before the shares were transferred, long before I ever stepped into that corner office. The amounts weren't small. They were strategic. Money skimmed from vendor overpayments, inflated consulting fees, advisory retainers that looped back into private accounts under my mother's maiden name. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I did what I've always done. I verified. By midnight, my forensic accountant confirmed it. The paper trail was real. Clean. Traceable. If I handed this to federal investigators, it would open an embezzlement case that would swallow what was left of my family whole. If I handed it to the board, my mother would be publicly removed, disgraced, possibly charged. If I handed it to the press, it would trend for weeks. The same society pages that once labeled me the disappointing daughter would devour it. But here's what revenge taught me. Exposure is easy. Restraint is power. The next morning I drove to the house I grew up in, the one with the marble staircase and the oil portraits that always felt more important than I did. My mother was in the kitchen. No silk this time. No audience. Just coffee and silence. I placed a folder on the table. She didn't touch it at first. "What is this?" she asked. "Your exit," I replied. Her hands trembled when she opened it. You could actually see the moment realization hit her. The moment she understood that the quiet daughter had been reading more than contracts. "You went through my accounts?" she whispered. "No," I said calmly. "They came to me." That part was true. A whistleblower inside the accounting firm had forwarded everything after the lawsuit went public. Apparently, loyalty shifts when power does. "You're going to destroy me," she said. I studied her face, the same face that smiled while calling me a lesson. "I don't have to," I answered. "You already did that." I slid a second document across the table, a resignation agreement. She would step down from all informal influence over the company, sign over any hidden financial interests, return the misappropriated funds through a structured repayment plan. And in exchange, I wouldn't file charges, I wouldn't notify the press, I wouldn't dismantle her socially the way she tried to dismantle me. "This is blackmail," she said. "No," I corrected. "This is mercy." For the first time in my life, she didn't have a comeback. Just tears. And here's the part nobody expects in a revenge story. Watching her break didn't feel powerful. It felt heavy. Because when you strip away ego and status and pride, you're just left with people who are too scared to love correctly. She signed. Not dramatically, not angrily, just defeated. Within weeks, the funds were returned quietly through legal channels. The board never knew the full story. The press moved on to the next scandal. My brother stopped trying to compete. And something strange happened. Peace. Not reconciliation. Not forgiveness, dinners, and family vacations. Just distance. Healthy, controlled distance. Dad improved enough to attend a small company rebranding event 6 months later. When he took the stage, he didn't talk about legacy. He talked about growth. Sometimes, he said into the microphone, the person you overlook is the one holding everything together. He didn't look at my brother. He looked at me, and this time the applause wasn't polite. It was real. But the biggest twist? I didn't keep the house. I sold it. The marble staircase, the oil portraits, the dining room where I learned how small they thought I was. Gone. I moved into a glass high-rise downtown, smaller, brighter, mine. And on the first night there, standing in front of the skyline, I realized something. Revenge wasn't the point. Control was. Not controlling people. Controlling access. Access to me. Access to my time. Access to my energy. My mother sends polite holiday texts now. My brother works at a mid-sized firm in Austin. My sister avoids business conversations entirely. And me? I run a company valued higher than it's ever been. But more importantly, I run my life. If you're listening to this and you're the lesson in your family, the one they mock, the one they underestimate, the one they introduce with a disclaimer, remember this: you don't have to scream to win. You don't have to expose everything to rise.